turns to sun rays, and on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go, on we'll go.
Okay. Now I have sound? Okay, and what's playing in the background? Okay. Now I have sound? Whoa. Okay, and what's playing in the background? Okay. Now I have sound? Oh. Okay, and what's playing in the background? There we go. That should do it. All right. I don't know why, but my headset's been just with Twitch. Nothing else. It's been cutting out. So I'm not sure what the hell's going on there. Is it a Twitch thing? Is it it's been compatible all this time. I don't know why it would suddenly change. But gotta make an adjustment here. Okay. So as I recall, I looked ahead and this is a fairly long chapter, so we need to get started and plow through it. It is 20 pages. So not horrible. All right. So chapter 6, Commando Aborning. I don't know what that means. The journey from Marshburg to Beech Grove took nearly a month, just under 25 days. A smaller party could have traveled faster, but Owen quickly learned that a unit of soldiers has no point in moving if it cannot be organized when it arrives. He had little time to ponder the slow pace of the journey, because the second thing he learned was that armies do not need the sun for their days to begin. Curtis, as sergeant-at-arms, and thus the chief sergeant in the platoon, oversaw his training in the use of swords and general indoctrination into the king's service. His day began before dawn and went until after he had tucked the sun into its bed. "Pah!" Curtis remarked when Owen first said something about the long days. Do you think wars are held over for lunch and supper? The orcs'll let you have a good night's rest when you're exhausted, just so's you can be a tougher opponent. Just so's you... Oh, that was a question. The moment you want to quit, though, you go right ahead. All you have to do is get run through the belly. Once your squirming's done, then your troubles are over. Owen did not mind the long days and short nights, nor did he mind Curtis's approach to teaching him. The old sergeant would jump down your throat for a stupid mistake, but he was fair. If you did not know, he would explain and demonstrate with extreme patience. The training was not all window dressing to fool the soldiers, not part of the mission. Swordsmanship, map reading, and signaling, whether with flags, smoke, bugles, mirrors, or drums, were among the lessons. Curtis drew on nearly 50 years of experience as he taught Owen, and did not train him alone. Sergeant Wilmer taught him as well, along with most of the platoon. They helped with foe recognition and different tactics for different foes and numbers. But first they tested his weapons aptitude. Archery was a skill he needed little drilling upon, and his staff fighting experience made learning the spear much easier than for a city-born recruit. Swordsmanship came much more slowly. "Easy there, man," Sergeant Wilmer said to him one afternoon. "The best steel can be broken, and a sword is not an axe. You're treating it as if it were. Don't chop with the sword. Stab and slash with it. It looks like you're hewing wood." Okay, we have an ad coming up. Owen nodded and began again, slicing the melons and roots that were his targets. He moved through the course, cutting down each opponent that he came to. Wilmer called him over when he was done. "Have a drink. Do you have any questions?" "Yes," Owen said, when he had finished with his water. "How's this training realistic? Walking through a small field, stabbing straw and clay men, cutting up plants and melons. How's that real?" "But you haven't been walking, have you? We've been making you run through it, and you've come out of each session breathing hard, have you not?" Okay, we're going to start an ad now. So, I will wait until it ends. Oh, where's my counter? I don't see a counter. Okay, well, I'll just keep going then. It acted like it was starting and then it didn't give me anything. Okay. Owen had to nod. Then Wilmer explained, Bosun. Oh, Bosun. This is melee training. Melee. A melee is when a fight has gone into hell's dung heap. While the lines hold, two armies will fight each other as units, but often fights lose their order. When that happens, you may or may not have friends nearby, but you can't call it a formation. Then foes come at you from all directions. You must face opponent after opponent, striking quickly, wasting no time, for another opponent will come against you. Nor do you want to stop moving. Archers can still single out targets in the melee. So you face one foe, cut him down, then turn to face another. This process repeats until you're killed, captured, wounded, or victorious. Okay, now it's finally telling me about the ad. So, we'll wait 30 seconds. I'm reading this for other people's benefit, so I need to wait so they can actually hear me. So, 6 seconds. And we're back. Okay. If a battle is such that you can take time to fence, fine. But usually if your blow does not take your opponent, his will take you. So we all run through this training, and I mean run through it, to imitate you coming to the battle or the battle coming to you. If you had a proper training yard, we wouldn't use still mannequins, but we didn't expect new swordsmen. Until we've made some training mannequins, we have to improvise. That's another lesson for any soldier, when to improvise. Now set them up again, don't get killed this time. What? Owen said. Wilmer pointed to a pole with a slashed melon lying beside it, a pole that Owen had passed in the first minute of the 10-minute drill. You took a half-heartbeat too long to face him, so I judged that he killed you. It might have been fast enough in a battle, but I like certainty. Run through it again. His mannequin training lasted for less than a week, and Owen became comfortable using the sword he had been given, using it against pole mannequins rigged to move, and some that could actually strike with their weapons. Then Curtis judged he should fight live men in training. Like most students who master the mannequin yard, the first drills against live opponents left him sore and defeated every time. That's the trouble with any such yard, Owen, a commando named Thal said. You get used to it, you fall into a rhythm, no matter how hard you try not to, and the mannequins don't change it. Live opponents are always harder. After I came out of the mannequin yard, it took me days before I could win. You already beat me once today. Just remember that a live opponent won't always do what is expected. The training with swords progressed, and Owen came to realize something as he watched two of his trainers battling while he rested between sessions. The stories of duels between swordsmen lasting for hours or even minutes are completely false, aren't they? Smiling, Curtis called a halt to the two trainers' fight. Arthur and Rohan stopped fighting, and Curtis repeated Owen's question. Usually, Owen, Arthur began, a fight lasts less than 3 strikes. People who aren't trained think it's a glorious idea to trade blows. Battle fighting's not like that at all. Your opponent's not waiting for your blow to land before he strikes, but is trying to defeat your attack while striking his own. Yes, stories of long duels are completely false. Mostly, Roarhan amended for Arthur, because you expect your blows to strike or you wouldn't make them. Occasionally, you might probe an opponent's defenses to gauge how good he is. That can happen in a melee, but just to find an opening. When one's found, you strike. If it doesn't succeed, then his will, because in committing to a strike, you generally expose yourself if your blow doesn't end it. So long fights don't happen at all, Owen stated. Almost never, Owen, Curtis said, and mainly with light swords. Light swords are for fencing. They're not really made to go up against shield-bearing troops. They can if you have to use one, but a light sword is more vulnerable to breaking in a battle. Dueling proper is actually an informal dance with swords, not life and death. You've learned today's lesson now. Tomorrow we'll start training on other weapons. The training proceeded through the trip from Marshburg. Owen needed little instruction on other weapons, but being a soldier entailed more than just knowledge of killing. Owen very readily picked up land navigation and map reading, having a very good sense of direction from living his whole life in a swamp. Foe recognition was something that did not come so quickly. What are the names of the foes you can face, Owen? Name them again, Castor asked, an undersergeant and the chief archer of the 12th Scout platoon. Determining that Owen's skill with bows was enough to be called proficient, he had started drilling him on other subjects in what soldiers called hip pocket training. Men, Owen recited, from anywhere in the world, from under 5 feet tall to over 7. He recited names and basic descriptions of the most common enemies until he came to the difference between trolls and ogres. Oh, trolls are afraid of water and ogres can swim. Then Owen frowned. But what about our trolls back home that live in the fens? The ones that explode when you set them on fire. They aren't afraid of water. Fen trolls, you mean? Owen, they're misnamed. Whoever started calling them fen trolls did everyone a disservice. Of course, no name really fits them. Not troll, ghoul, golem, or lich. They, the fen trolls, don't endure any form of heat. That's the main reason why most folks do not call them trolls. Trolls are fireproof, even the ones that get sick in sunlight. Now go on. Dragons are next, Owen said, reciting the list he had been taught when not practicing weapons or other skills. He went through it from top to bottom twice before Castor was satisfied. Men, orcs, haborks, trolls, fen trolls, dragons, wyverns, basilisks, golems, ghouls, grendels, liches, wights, kablants, sorcerers, hlemioks, werefels, variags, and finally legionnaires. Pausing, he found himself dwelling on the list. Castor knew he was thinking about death, but let Owen speak first. That's a lot of enemies, Owen reflected mournfully. Yes, it is. That's the list of all the servants of the Banelord known to still live in Angia, Owen. It's not a list of every opponent the king's soldiers or even the king's guard face on a mission. It's a list of every possible opponent except the Banelord. Compare that to this list. If the first one depresses you, Ordhawks, Minotaurs, Cyclisks, Brutans, Kablants, Gorgons, Gargoli, Fiends, Werefels, Variags, Gwithaints, the Fell Raptors, and he spoke for several minutes, listing the known names of the races that the Banelord had made, most since driven to extinction. Finally, he came to the end. And while Kablants, Variags, and Werefels still might exist, they'll not rise to what they were. Wights and liches are rare, only used by very powerful sorcerer, with just the one exception, of course. But we shouldn't have to worry over them. You know how to kill fen ghouls, and simple ghouls are easier. You can take a fen worm, so you can take a dragon, a wyvern, or a basilisk if careful. True trolls are harder, but more rare. Grendels are the only other giant descendants that aren't trolls, but they are very rare indeed. No man's seen one since the Battle of the Lake that I know of. Golems are almost as rare, though it usually takes a wizard to take one. Who does that leave? Orcs, men, and sorcerers. None of them are any harder to kill than you or I, and your training's enough for any of them. Owen nodded. What about legionnaires or Hlemioks? Castor looked at him, his expression grim and fell. Legionnaires can be killed if they're cut down or incinerated. If you face a Hlemiock, he paused for a moment, run if you can. The flesh demons are impossible for men to fight. The expression on his face made Owen forget the question he was about to ask about legionnaires. Curtis assigned a group of soldiers to spar with Owen, each one imitating a different type of opponent in some exercises, and in some Owen had to fight them as they normally fought. Blister and Hot Hands would fight him 2-on-1, or Terran, Terwin, Jed, and Thrandal would fight him 4-1. Occasionally, the war mage Basin would join in the sparring, along with Liston and Castor. Owen was very hard pressed and had never felt so bruised in his life. Quickly at first, and then more slowly, would he be killed in the exercises, gradually working to the point where sometimes he killed half of them in 10-1 combat. He learned to live with the bruises, though they did not suit his mood. Coming to eat dinner one evening after spending all day having his head handed to him during sparring, he started mumbling that they were trying to bruise him to death. Taurus started laughing. What I want to know is, how are they training all day long if they're traveling for a month? I don't get that. But a minor detail. Owen, he said, I had similar thoughts. How did you expect this to go? The point of it is to learn skill, endurance, and precision. Endure to place a precise strike. Avoid the enemy's strokes if you can. Parry or deflect them if you cannot. Or better yet, prevent them altogether by striking first. One way or another, you endure to place a precise, skilled strike. Owen nodded. Is that what you were taught, Dad? The older McOwen shook his head. The orcs that started to make us slaves into troops gave us just a little training. 200 slaves, and a week after they put swords in our hands, they turned us loose against Krogger's orcs. Gant's orcs won the battle, and 47 of us slaves lived to watch the victors feast on the corpses. That's before they put Curtis and Anders with us to teach us. I'm thankful for every bruise you got, boy. Better to learn fighting this way. Curtis was merciless. Owen would just barely beat Hot Hands or Blister, and Curtis would restart the training because Owen was too slow moving a foot once in 5 minutes of drill. He would let Owen become familiar with a weapon just long enough for him to start growing comfortable with it. Then he would shift to a completely different blade, one that was used with different forms and tactics. Owen would be fighting for 3/4 of an hour, and then Curtis would make him run around the camp to continue fighting where he left off. But Owen was stubborn and refused to quit. Surprising all the soldiers, Owen learned rapidly, so quickly that Curtis at first thought he had forgotten some step of the training process. Owen was a fast study, and it truly helped that the only weaponry he needed to learn were sword and shield. Curtis soon had Owen fight against all odds. Such training can only go so far, Curtis, Sergeant Wilmer observed the morning that Owen had been practicing for 3 weeks. We don't want to teach him that he'll always be beaten. Curtis's immediate subordinate, he had the respect of every soldier in their company, despite the fact that he had been full King's Guard for only 10 years, less than half the time it would normally have taken to reach his rank. Curtis listened carefully to Wilmer, though he did not agree. The boy doesn't lose heart. That's why I still train him this way, and we're a bit pressed for time. True, he should do all right when the time comes. If he can swing his sword against people that walk on two legs, if he can draw blood, and if the first time he draws blood he doesn't freeze in horror. Will, Curtis said, the only man in the platoon who dared call Sergeant Wilmer that. You're always a pessimist. Something tells me that the boy won't come to nothing. Yeah, he's unproven, but I'm not worried. Concentrate, lad, he shouted to Owen as he sparred with 8 or 9 of the platoon. Wilmer deliberately kept himself from counting them. This form of melee training was one that he personally detested and thought of little use. Curtis continued, when he gets a real good run against him, I'll change methods again. Silently watching the melee for a few minutes, the two sergeants looked for flaws in their soldiers' routines. They fight very realistically, Wilmer noted, satisfied that the veterans weren't just going through the motions. Owen seems to match them well. He relies on his strength too much, he noted, surprised that Curtis hadn't seen it. Yeah, he does. I tried correcting that early on, but he takes too much speed off his strokes when he pulls his power. If we'd more time, I'd hone him more properly, but for now, speed and power will serve. Wilmer understood. Time constraints meant that they could not properly emphasize everything, and there was no point in a blow being made if it was too slow or weak to be any good. Just so long as he doesn't break his weapon while using it, he said, looking at the rest of the camp. Curtis shook his head at Wilmer's pessimism. Then he smiled, looking back at the training yard they had improvised when their column stopped that afternoon. Wilmer was surprised. Owen was standing in the field alone, dye bags showing him wounded, but the soldiers who had been his opposition, were lying down or sitting to show defeated opponents, their dye bags showing they'd been killed. And you thought this training was overdone? Curtis said to Wilmer. Wilmer shook his head. I said it could only go so far. Do you think he can do that every time? No, of course you don't, he said, hastily answering his own rhetorical question and continuing on. Either way, I think you've got the victory you wanted. No need for him to get cocky. Curtis began sparring with Owen himself then, and Owen quickly came to suspect that Curtis's limp was an affectation. The other soldiers became a cross between spectators, counselors, and gamblers, answering the questions that rose after fighting the old sergeant, as money changed hands, and they drew lots to see who'd bet on Owen the next time. After several sessions of his teacher utterly overwhelming him, and seeing the soldiers who bet on him lose several weeks' pay, Curtis said that was enough. Now for some real fightin'. The wizard's fixed up something special, Owen. The man rubbed his hands together in anticipation, and then pointed. Following the man's finger, Owen saw several clay and straw mannequins, about 40 of them, come shambling into the training ground they had set up after making camp. Show them lichers what I taught you, Curtis said as he shoved Owen toward them. Immediately the mannequins, a form of golem, Owen deduced, began to sprint towards him. Owen calculated their advance and then ran straight for the first one, ducking its sword stroke. They carry lathe swords bound with thin metal bands. He beheaded it and threw it over as he slammed it with his shield. Good, Curtis said. Quickly the praise stopped as Owen faced the others. He cut one's leg off and slipped his sword through one's heart. He turned to face the next one, cutting off its shield arm. He cut off the next one's leg, but the one who just lost his arm stabbed him with its lathe blade. An unstoppable jolt went through Owen, and he actually wet himself. A second and third jolt went through him, and a couple more. The last thing he saw was the one he'd beheaded had stabbed him in the back. The magical jolt of it knocked him unconscious. A bucket of water brought him back. Get off my field, boy, Curtis said roughly. Pay attention. Go sit over there. Owen frowned, but knew better by now than to ask the sergeant why he was so irritated. He sat down at the edge of the field on a log at the bottom of the old stone amphitheater. Thal sat next to him. along with Rorhan and Arthur. Lipturn, one of the platoon's junior members, who was not going with them, sat right above them. "Why's Curtis angry with me? You didn't understand what he meant by lichers, boy's son. Beau's son, sorry, I keep mispronouncing that one," Thal said. "These are bond golems, designed to simulate fighting." "Oh, the bondsman," Owen said, remembering the word from his vision. He thought about that and realized only the 11 mages and 2 of the dwarves had ever mentioned them. Why hadn't the others? Another question popped into his mind. Why does he do that? They followed his gaze. "Curtis always trains hard," Rorhan began. "No, I mean how he attacks them." "Oh, they are made to stop once they're stabbed in the heart." Owen frowned again. He'd stabbed one in the heart. Why is he overdoing it? Is that what I mean? Why is he overdoing it is what I mean. Sword arm, shield arm, neck, and heart. Sword arm, shield arm, neck, and heart. Sword arm, shield leg, head, neck, and heart, Owen recited, following the sequences Curtis used as he fought the golems. "Owen, they simulate the Legionnaires," Arthur said. He, Thal, and Rorhan were looking at him with concern. Legionnaires? All his trainers had mentioned them, but Owen had not realized they were the same as... "I thought you said they were to simulate the bondsmen. Why did they have so many names? That seemed ominous." "Oh, very funny, Owen," Thal thought in disgust. Some of the soldiers laughed and looked away again, but Lipturn laughed and then his eyes widened. "Oh, by 10,000 gods, he doesn't know what the Legionnaires are." The man had not meant to shout, but Curtis started so badly that he must have heard. 5 of the golems struck him before he could order them to stand down. Castor threw a bucket of water at him, but missed because he was looking over at Lipturn and Owen. Thal, Rorhan, and Arthur all looked at Lipturn as if the man had lost his mind, but their gazes widened at the puzzlement on Owen's face. He waved his arm in a "what" gesture. "They're liches," Thal said. "Whites." "They have those names too?" "How many names do they have?" He shook his head. "I suppose a better question would be, what's a lich, and what's a white?" Thal, Rorhan, and Arthur were all equally stunned to hear this. All their mothers had frightened them with those words. The 3 were cousins. Owen began to feel defensive. "What? Everyone keeps saying how many enemies there are, and how many there were. How many of them have so many names? The mages and elves have mentioned liches and whites. So have the dwarves," Owen nodded. "Now that I think on it, but none of them seemed too worried about him." Taurus and his father joined them as Curtis limped over. "Well, they wouldn't be," Thal said. "They wouldn't be. They only can be killed by them, and the same with wizards. How in the name of Angia could you not know about the Legionnaires?" Thal ripped out, unable to control his shock. Taurus's eyes widened but narrowed quickly, and he nodded, but Oxbow bellowed. "What? Don't you remember me talking to you? Why didn't you listen to me, boy?" That lit the fuse. Owen flushed as the long shielded memory returned, the enchantment upon it releasing. "You mean when you kept waking me up in the middle of the night and scared me so bad the wizards back home had to put a memory spell on me to keep me from having nightmares?" He said this in an unnaturally pleasant tone. The enchantment released completely, and the suppressed memories returned, along with a rage that Owen could barely contain. It was all he could do not to hit his father. "Because, old man," Owen said, rising, his face redder than a sunset, "I was 4 years old the last time you ever woke me like that, and you were always so drunk you couldn't speak." Owen literally spat, at his father. You'd ramble and mutter in your cups where I couldn't hear more'n a word or two about my uncles, and every few mutters you'd turn, grab my arm, and shout, "Are you listening to me, boy?" And I'd nod, 'cause I was listening. Didn't understand any of it, but I was listening. Owen's face was a transport of rage. His father and Taurus both stepped back, and Oxbow flinched and turned sideways, afraid his son would strike him. Owen was shaking, fighting himself from that very thing. And then you'd drink and drink until you'd fall off the floor. My mom's got tired of me being terrified of you, so they finally got the wizards back home to spell you so's they knew when you was in one of them moods, and one of them would take you off to make another baby, while the others three'd sing me lullabies so I didn't get more nightmares. And they still had to get the wizards to spell you again so's you didn't drink. Owen thundered loudly at his father, his accent thicker than stone. 'Cause of that, I had my own nightmares on top of the ones I used to hear my mom screaming out. Nightmares till I was 10. They stopped when they finally got the wizards to put a forgetting on me. I only remember now 'cause you brung it up. So don't you yell at me, old man, for not knowing something you ain't never taught, and don't never call me boy again. Okay. Oxbow broke down sobbing at that, for he had done all he could to shield his children from their parents' past, and in truth he'd mostly succeeded, but his oldest son's rage, his baby boy's rage, was more than he could bear, especially knowing now that his fear and shame had left his son so ignorant. He turned and fled. Taurus tried to go after him, but Curtis caught his arm. "I've been where he's been, Taurus Longreach," the old sergeant said, "and I've been that drunk." Curtis went after Oxbow, and Taurus turned to Owen. "He has his faults, Owen," he said angrily, "but everything I've taught you was built on what he taught you, and he taught you well. Do not speak so to your father." "You never heard the nightmares," Owen growled. "You're right, but you never heard the nightmares." Wellman put his fingers to Oxbow's brow and pulled them back as if burned. "That was strong majory," he looked to Taurus. "Captain Oxbow is lucky he didn't kill him, Master Longreach." Over a dozen pairs of eyes widened at that, and Taurus hissed. So great was his shock. Stunned eyes regarded Owen. Owen looked about, so angry he could eat raw dragon liver, and saw the soldiers looking at him in shock. From his anger now, not his ignorance. Owen knew he was not fit to live with while so enraged. He seized the log he'd been sitting on, dumping Thal, Arthur, and Rohan to the ground as he picked it up with one hand. He made little juggling motions, shifting in his hand until he had its balance, point centered over his palm. Then, with a roaring bellow, he hurled it overhand toward the training field. Hurled it so hard and so high that the men around him did not have to duck as it flew. It crashed into the bond golems, destroying 4 of them instantly. "Will someone please just tell me what in every holy hell a legionnaire is, and how the hell's many names do the bastards got?" "They have many, Owen," Arnest said, "and perhaps that is part of the problem. You did not recognize that they were all for one foe. Lich, White, Lichman, Legionnaire, Corpsman, Corpsman, Bondsman, Bonders. I've heard, and many others that are less common. Perhaps it also did not help that in our history there are 2 types of legions. Originally, the term referred to the forces Brian had ordered along different aspects of the body of a man, the Legion of the Heart and the Legion of the Sword Hand. The Legion of the Mind and all the rest of them," Owen interrupted. "Yeah, I knew that. But," Arnest continued emphatically, "after all, but Ollie's legion disappeared, new ones arose, ones that served the Banelord. Perhaps some of them are from Brian's legions, traders or slaves. Whatever their origin, they are bound to serve the Banelord, bound and recruited, and if you wish to destroy one of them, whatever unit they are in, company or legion, you must destroy them all. So they are the bondsmen, Owen said. But why does that make them different from any other kind of man who serves the falsen? It was Liptern who answered. When he said recruited, he meant men killed in battle. How do you fight something that's already dead, Owen? Owen's face radiated shock. What? That sounds like a campfire tale. Pratt Garrison said something once about the Distemper brothers and the War of the Dead Mage Prince. Is that what you're talking about? Owen looked around angry again, because they were trying to scare him with tall tales he'd never thought had a lick of truth to them. Are you just trying to joke me or what? The others looked at him horrified. He thought they were all pulling a prank on him. Distemper brothers, Arnis said. Now that is a new name even to me, and I've never heard the term Dead Mage Prince in nearly forever. He looked Owen directly in the eye. We've talked about the Dead Mage Prince, Owen. Do you not remember our discussion about the Lich King? Didn't one of us call him the White Prince? I thought you meant someone'll have to tell me what whites and liches are. But even if they are the Distemper brothers, why should I fear him any more than anyone else who could kill me? Because, Owen, you are a man, Taurus said, at last controlling his temper and telling Owen the final secret. A full-blooded human male without a trace of elven or elder blood. You are not a mage, and you are not a son of Wintherian, and you certainly are no Norseman. That means that if they kill you, and being wounded by their weapons is always certain death, you will join them as a bond slave, a death slave. Okay. Owen swallowed. An icy fear was growing in his center as he remembered the more horrific parts of Pratt's tale. Now they sounded like the only true parts. The tale ended with the dead Mage Prince ensuring that the Iron Brothers never again tried to enslave a wizard. That's why so many of the soldiers are battle mages, he breathed. And Taurus nodded. They weren't true wizards, but it might stop them from being recruited. How do you fight them then? Magery and fire, Sergeant Wilmer said, coming up. Better yet, magiric fire. Magiric fire. That's if you must fight them at all. Lacking those, you must break their formation while keeping your own and pray that they've a flag with them. Flag or not, you must take them by weight of numbers, hacking each one to pieces. A very long fall over 200 feet can destroy a legionnaire by shattering its corpse. Thrown boulders might kill them, or a rock slide. A heavy blow can destroy them. Dragon's tail, troll hammer, perhaps a siege engine. Other than those, if you fight them, you have to butcher them. Truly butcher them, until the sum of their damaged flesh can no longer contain the bond and they turn to dust. Wilmer's face looked wiped of emotion. Then a curious look filled his face. What did you think they meant when they called them undead? Owen looked nauseous at the whole business. I never heard no one say undead, Sergeant. I just thought they were races, and y'all said there weren't much chance of 'em. The mages didn't really seem to fear 'em. They started arguing, and they never did say much that made sense about them. He shuddered. What wizards were they? Wilmer asked. Owen pointed, and Wilmer shook his head. No wizard really would fear them, Owen. But other than those group Taurus mentioned, every grown man can be forced to join them by being killed. They kill to recruit. He looked at Owen studiously, and somehow Owen got the impression that he was not as shocked as the others. I knew something was different about you, Beau's son. I could sense it. Now I know. You did not fear the undead. He looked at the others. His Highness ordered you to train him, to teach him what he needed to know. This is no different. But Sergeant, how could he not know? Wilmer cut Rorhan off. There was a day he did not know babies were born, and he once didn't know how to walk. Twice, Taurus interrupted, coming to his pupil's defense. That is, he had to learn to walk twice. How many of you have survived the muscle fever? Survived it when it was full blown and not been crippled by it. Wilmer continued as the soldiers reeled a bit. This is no more fundamental than those, perhaps less. The Crown Prince made it our job to teach him. Call them legionnaires or undead, so there is no more confusion. He gestured to the other soldiers. We train him. Remember, if he could overcome muscle fever, he can overcome his lack of knowledge. Remember the prince's order, and remember it's my job to see that no man's left to the undead. Having said this, Sergeant Wilmer walked off. What did he mean by all that? Flags and such. And sensing something different about me? Owen asked with a puzzled look on his face. His accent was still honey thick. If they don't have a flag with them, the unit you've run across is still tied to its legion, Thal said. And even if it's half a world away, you can still get the distemper, the legion sickness, even if you wreck them all. If they have a single flag, though, if you destroy all of them and take their flag, their standard, you've broken that group forever. Sometimes you can do that if they have more than one flag, too, though about half the time those companies are still tied to their legion. Men who do break a legion company that way are immune to the legion sickness, the distemper. The bond's reversed. They become legion-proof. Better still, their iron also reverses. It becomes rebounded, and sometimes folk call it blood steel. That kills most of them like they were still alive. It's poison to them. Poison magic. He shook his head. No one's done that in my life. Maybe not since my granddad was born. Owen had heard of blood steel. And the rest of what he said? The distemper is a disease like any other, Rorhan answered. It's a disease of the soul, but still an illness. Most men who touch legion steel die and don't join them, but it's not like they get to choose. They even say that in the East there are whole cities of stockpiled corpses waiting to be raised to the legions. Owen gulped at the thought. Rorhan went on. Like any disease, though, sometimes a man survives on his own without a mage or a priest healing him. That changes a man, like something a lover or a father, like becoming a lover or a father, only it isn't as pleasant. If they don't have a banner, they can only hope to not be wounded. If you are, he mimed decapitation, then shrugged. That happened to Sergeant Wilmer. He's the only man alive who's survived the distemper, and he feels when men are close, undead or not. But he had to kill all the others in his company, Arthur said. Owen gaped in horror. Lipturn clapped him on the shoulder. Come on, let's go train against these bond mannequins. That's why I came to join you. I know Sergeant Curtis was having the wizards make them. I knew he was having. You're not going on the mission. Lipturn looked at Castor sternly. I'm still a member of the King's Guard, and I'm going with the relief company to the southern race, Under Sergeant. Besides, unlike someone I know, I can't kill 'em by hitting them with trees. They all snorted at that, including Owen, but the icy feeling in the pit of his stomach remained even after he was too exhausted to think. The feeling had grown roots, and he wondered if he would ever sleep easy again. We're almost there, like 4 more pages. The last days of the journey to Beech Grove were less hectic. Owen found that he started liking the soldiers and that they were beginning to accept him in their unit, though some of them were a little reluctant to admit it. Taran Terwin, Thranduil, and Jed in particular enjoyed the stories Owen told of life in the fens. Owen discovered the soldiers had trouble believing him. Perhaps it was because of his straight face that they considered him an excellent tale spinner, but Owen was telling the absolute truth. During the journey he had grown tired of some of the soldiers disbelieving him, and now that came forth with a shout. The soldiers doubted less after he put his crossbow bolt through a foot-thick swamp elm. The dwarves in the party were impressed by the strength of the weapon, but the elves were not pleased at what he had done to the tree. Barnes, Liston, and Castor told him tales of far lands and old stories, some of them actually true. Braster, alone of all the soldiers, had little to do with Owen. He was too new a sergeant to help in training. Neither Curtis nor Wilmer would let him fall back into the habit of just being a soldier. Besides, he just didn't like Owen. Curtis did not slacken, though, now having Owen running through refresher exercises, and he had no time for the others, at least not when they encamped. "Easy on the blade, boy." "Troll dung," Curtis bellowed the afternoon before they made it to Beech Grove. Lellebrin was watching, having heard excellent reports from Wilmer and even Braster on Owen's progress. Curtis continued, "The best of blades can be broke, and a sword ain't made for hewing wood. The gods got a point on the blasted thing for a reason. Try it again." Taurus came up to Lellebrin as Owen restarted. "How did he save thee, cousin?" he asked in Old Elvish, showing himself to be a contemporary of Daedoran. "After killing the beast, he treated my wounds and carried me home. The wizards had enough of my blood preserved for transfusion, and his brother had made an antivenom by then." "So quickly?" Lellebrin said in surprise. "The mages, alchemists, and alchemists there are perhaps the best in the world." "The lad traineth hard," Lellebrin said, switching to small talk. Taurus replied in kind in Elvish. "Curtis is a good drill master, and Owen a quick learner. Yet he hath a great quantity to learn. He hath never seen an orc, neither a troll, nor even a bandit." Would that we were so fortunate," Taurus replied. Lellebrin snorted. "I know, Lellebrin. His education is not broad, but it's deep. He'll do well." "I doubt that not, cousin," the elf replied, "though thou hast ever been a good judge of metal, and that must hath been the first time in 12 years that thou wast not cursing me when my name crossed thy lips." His eyes were watery. "Not the first time. Then I felt that you had betrayed me. You were my distant cousin, were my best friend, and you were the one who petitioned hardest for me to be retired in disgrace." He spoke like he was cleaning a wound. "Thou dost know why. We are kin, and we were best friends. I had no petition for that end. I had expected better of thee." "You seem to have forgotten what that dragon did," Taurus said icily. "Never, Taurus. Yet thou didst act as if only thou hadst suffered by that damnable drake. We were bereaved as well. The entire order would have stood behind thee. Yet thou didst make the hunt into a personal crusade. So when thou didst take longer than the warrant permitted, I had to vote for thine exile. In truth, I was surprised that thou didst not pretend that the warrant had been completed before it expired. Then I truly would have deserved banishment, perhaps even death. That could not be kept secret, and Dragoneers would have died because of it. Cousin, you have not understood. None of you did. I did not hunt the dragon alone out of a desire for revenge." Pausing the conversation, he watched Owen mutilate Melons with a sword as Curtis watched his form and strokes. "Swiftly, lad, and hold that sword like this." "He seems to be doing better with the point, only using the edge when he must." "Indeed," Lellebrin concurred. "But do not change the subject. Why didst thou pursue Glareth alone, then?" Taurus sighed. Cousin, the Dragoneers were all that I had left. The thought of any of them dying to help me kill Glareth was more than I could bear. Silently, he watched as Owen reset up the yard with new opponents from a wagon load of melons unfit for consumption. Taurus then spoke again. All right, I've made my confession. Now I am ready for yours. Meaning, cousin? Do not try to hide it from me. The other elves told me of the different interpretations. You do not actually think the Pettibanes can use the power of the Glee Sages. They never could before. No, they will try, however, and if the Wardens sent the vision, then they fear it. That power was the last remnant of man from before the First Age. The Banelord had hard enough time accomplishing what he did against us. His petty successors could not even conceive of how to utilize this power. And should Nerzao ever return? The nameless mage only exiled him to his capital, not outside the world. What if a minion decided to rouse him, such as the Fell Lord Wraith? None of the visions said anything about him, nor did your interpretation, unless you had word of him since. Taurus trembled, terrified at the prospect. Lelibran shook his head. Methinks that sense alone doth dictate that we deprive him of the opportunity. Doth that require a vision? Cousin, many could die on this mission, most of them men, full-blooded men who often do not have even a century of life. Taurus's eyes widened. That's it, isn't it? That's why you stampeded the council with this marginal interpretation of the dream. You want men to recover what they have lost. Lelibran's eyes narrowed. Mine interpretation doth not be marginal. As for the other, were that to occur, I would not mourn. What would our God say, Lilibran? Did he not say that man must remember on his own or would forget again? That those of us with elder blood must be patient? Is this not the time? Wouldst thou rather that the ancient war continue? Should we not act before the Banelord is freed? That is not for you to decide, Lelibran. I applaud your goal, but it is fraught with ambition. He sighed. Promise me you will retire after this mission. Why, Taurus? The alliance has been restored. You don't have to be the single elven warrior guarding man. Do you think I am maddened by my burden? I think you were the only captain of the alliance for a very long time. Myriads of war during the worst time in the alliance would burden any elf. I do hope to retire, cuz. Good. All your arguments make sense, but cousin, he grabbed Lelibran's arm, do not let this desire consume you. If you do the right thing, but for the wrong reason, you are no better than the Banelord. Lelibran stayed on the hill long into the evening, thinking about what Taurus had said, long after only the sentries were awake, thinking about his motives, and again that night Owen dreamed of a mighty tree. And we're done. That was the end of that chapter. So, other than training, not a whole lot went on. We got a little bit more background. I have to confess, though, other than a couple of the main characters, I'm really having a hard time keeping track of who's who. There's just too many names, and they don't come up often enough that I'm remembering who they are. But, that's just the way it is. It's the first book in maybe a series. Don't know. And there's got to be a lot of setup to it. So, anyway, that'll be that. I think I am just going to call it there tonight. And I will see you all tomorrow night for some Far Cry 6. See you then.
Don't lie don't like the lights, but it's camera time. Said take the picture, but you rolled your eyes. Now I'm mortified, and still terrorize. Push me behind to get my better side. I wanna push you back.
Actually, what? I've changed my mind. I'm going to go ahead and raid Count Levy. I'm playing Far Cry 5, and I've not even ever seen it.